8-foot alien. Queen laughed at the idea of breeding with a human until she got pregnant. Reaches its dramatic apex when Aurelia gives birth amid a tense escape. As Solarian ships close in, their newborn daughter Aurora, impossibly conceived through bioelectric field interaction, manifests reality-bending powers, disabling an entire fleet with a wave of her tiny hand, instantly transforming from abomination to miracle and forever altering interspecies relations. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The frozen winds of Kala 6 howled across the desolate surface. Ice crystals stinging like microscopic daggers against any exposed surface. Commander Will Watson squinted through his shuttle's cracked viewport as warning signals flashed across his control panel. The storm had appeared out of nowhere, a swirling vortex of absolute cold that had knocked out his navigation systems and sent the small craft spiraling toward the planet's surface. Mayday! Mayday! This is Commander William Watson of the Earth Expeditionary Force. My shuttle is going down on Kala 6. Coordinates. He glanced at the flickering display. Coordinates uncertain. Northern Hemisphere. Please respond. Static answered him. Of course. The storm would block any transmission until it passed, if he survived that long. The shuttle bucked violently, and Will gripped the controls with white knuckles. Come on, you piece of junk, he muttered. Just a little longer. The craft broke through a layer of clouds, revealing a jagged mountain range below. Will's heart sank. No flat terrain for an emergency landing. He'd have to thread between the peaks and pray. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold already seeping into the cabin. The life support systems were failing, temperature dropping by the second. His fingers, even in the insulated flight gloves, were growing numb. The shuttle scraped against an outcropping of rock, sending it into a spin. Will fought the controls, muscles straining. Another impact. Metal screamed. And then, mercifully, a plateau appeared ahead. Not ideal, but better than the alternative. Will aimed for it, firing retro thrusters in a desperate bid to slow his descent. The landing struts deployed with a mechanical groan. The shuttle hit hard, skidding across ice and stone. The impact threw Will against his restraints, pain lancing through his chest. But he was down, alive, at least for now. Warning indicators bathed the cockpit in angry red light. Outside temperature, minus 40 degrees Celsius. Oxygen reserves, 17%. Power cells, critical. Perfect, Will muttered, reaching for his emergency pack. He'd need to find shelter, and fast. The shuttle wouldn't sustain him for more than an hour in these conditions. Will sealed his environmental suit, the armor automatically adjusting to his body temperature. It would buy him time, but not much. He slung the pack over his shoulder and moved to the airlock. The moment the door slid open, the full fury of Kala 6 assaulted him. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet. Visibility reduced to mere meters. Ice particles clung to his visor. The suit's external sensors immediately began flashing warnings. He activated his scanner, sweeping the area for any sign of shelter. Nothing but rock and ice. But wait, what was that? A faint energy reading emanating from the mountain face about 200 meters to the north. Artificial. Definitely not natural. Will trudged forward, each step a battle against the storm. His suit's temperature regulators worked overtime, but the cold was relentless, seeping in at the joints, finding every microscopic weakness. 20 minutes of grueling progress brought him to the base of the cliff. The energy signature was stronger now, coming from somewhere above. Will looked up, squinting through the swirling snow. There, a narrow fissure in the rock face, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He began to climb, fingers searching for handholds in the ice-slick stone. The wind threatened to tear him from the cliff with each gust. Twice, he nearly fell, saved only by the magnetic grips in his gloves and boots. Finally, Will hauled himself into the narrow opening. It widened into a tunnel that sloped gently downward. Natural. No. Too uniform. This had been cut into the mountain deliberately. The tunnel extended deep into the rock, illuminated by a soft ambient light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Will's scanner picked up atmospheric changes, warmer temperatures, breathable air. Someone or something was maintaining this place. He proceeded cautiously, one hand near his sidearm. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and Will stopped short, breath catching in his throat. The space before him was vast, a cathedral carved from the living rock. Crystalline formations jutted from walls and ceiling, catching and refracting light in dazzling patterns. But it wasn't the architecture that stunned him. It was the figure seated upon a raised dais at the chamber's center. She was humanoid, but impossibly tall, 8 feet at least. Her skin gleamed like burnished copper in the crystal light, a sunset orange hue that seemed to pulse with an inner radiance. A crown of metallic filaments adorned her head, woven into hair the color of a night sky, deep purple with pinpricks of light like distant stars. The alien queen, for what else could she be, rose to her full height, towering over Will. In one fluid motion, she raised a weapon, a spear that hummed with contained energy. Her eyes, vertically slitted like a cat's and a startling shade of silver, narrowed as they fixed on him. A device at her throat pulsed, and then words filled the chamber, translated, but still carrying the musical cadence of her native tongue. "Identify yourself, prisoner." Will raised his hands slowly, making sure they stayed well away from his weapon. "Commander William Watson, Earth Expeditionary Force. I'm not a prisoner. I'm a survivor. My shuttle crashed in the storm. I was looking for shelter." The Queen's expression remained impassive, but the spear lowered slightly. "Humans do not belong on Kala 6. This world is claimed by the Solarian Empire." "Wasn't exactly my first choice for a vacation spot," Will replied, a nervous grin forming despite the danger. "Look, Your Majesty, is it Your Majesty? I'd be happy to discuss interplanetary territorial disputes somewhere warmer. My suit's power is failing, and I'll freeze to death in about—" He glanced at his wrist display. 43 minutes. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, at his irreverence. The Solarians were known for their rigid adherence to protocol and ceremony, but the storm still raged outside, and she seemed to realize that neither of them could easily leave. "I am Queen Aurelia, sovereign of the 7th dynasty, protector of the pure lineage, commander of the—" A tremendous crash interrupted her, the entire chamber shuddering. Dust and small fragments of crystal rained down from the ceiling. Will instinctively dove forward, covering his head. When he looked up, he saw that a section of the tunnel he'd entered through had collapsed, sealing them in. "The storm must have weakened the outer structure," Will said, picking himself up. "Is there another way out?" Aurelia's face had darkened, her silver eyes flashing with anger, or was it fear? "The primary entrance is on the other side of the mountain. This was merely an observation post." Her translator device clicked, struggling with her rapid speech. "We are contained here until rescue arrives." Another tremor shook the chamber, and the ambient light flickered. Aurelia moved swiftly to a control panel embedded in the wall, passing her hand over its surface. Symbols pulsed beneath her touch, but they flashed red, clearly not delivering the response she wanted. "The power core is destabilizing," she said, her voice tight. "The life support systems will fail within hours." Will moved to her side, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Let me see. I'm an engineer by training. Maybe I can help." Aurelia hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Finally, she stepped aside. "Your primitive understanding will be of little use, but you may examine the system." Will ignored the jab and studied the control panel. The symbols were alien, but the principles of power distribution were universal. He could see where energy flows were being disrupted, connections severed by the structural damage. "We need to reroute power from these secondary systems," he said, pointing. "Concentrate everything on maintaining core temperature and atmosphere." Aurelia's eyes narrowed. "That would sacrifice the communication array. How will my people find us?" "If we freeze to death, it won't matter who finds us," Will countered. "Besides, I have a distress beacon in my pack. Different technology. It might work where yours failed." Another tremor, stronger this time. The decision was made for them as several systems on the panel went dark. Aurelia's hands moved with surprising grace for their size, rapidly inputting commands. The remaining lights stabilized. "There," she said. "We have perhaps 48 hours of life support." She turned those silver eyes on Will, studying him with clinical detachment. "Remove your helmet, human. Conserve your suit's power." Will hesitated. "Are you sure the air is—" "It is compatible with your physiology," she interrupted. "My scanners analyzed you the moment you entered." Will unsealed his helmet and took a cautious breath. The air was thin but breathable, with a faint metallic tang. The temperature was cool but no longer life-threatening. He set the helmet aside and met Aurelia's gaze directly for the first time. "Thank you," he said simply. She turned away, moving back to her throne-like seat. "Do not mistake necessity for kindness. Commander Watson, once the storm passes, you will be taken to a proper detention facility. Humans are not welcome in Solarian space." Will unclipped his pack and began sorting through its contents. "Funny thing about that. According to the Galactic Accord of 2319, Kala 6 is in disputed territory. Your empire may claim it, but Earth has mining rights in the southern hemisphere." "Mining rights granted under duress," Aurelia retorted, her voice sharp. "Your kind spreads like a virus through the stars, contaminating everything you touch." Will pulled out his distress beacon and began activating it. Strong words from someone whose people detonated a moon to clear an asteroid belt for their shipping lanes. Aurelia rose, her height truly imposing now that Will stood before her without his helmet. "You dare to lecture me on ethics? The Solarian Empire has maintained genetic purity for 10,000 years. We have perfected our bloodlines while humans still crawl from the mud of their evolutionary past." Will couldn't help but laugh. "Genetic purity? Is that why your empire's birth rate has been declining for the last century? Sometimes a little mud does a genome good." He thought she might strike him then. Her hand tightened on her spear, knuckles whitening against that sunset skin. But instead, she turned away, staring at the crystalline formations that lined the walls. "You know nothing of our struggles," she said quietly. Will activated his beacon, watching as it cycled through its startup sequence. "Maybe not, but I know a dying empire when I see one." He set the device on a flat surface, making sure its signal was unobstructed. "New Darwin colony should pick this up once the storm clears. They'll send a rescue team." "And if my people arrive first?" Aurelia asked, turning back to face him. Will shrugged. "Then I guess I'll get to see one of those detention facilities after all." The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the struggling life support systems and the distant howl of the storm. Will began to explore their surroundings, partly out of curiosity, partly to assess their situation. The chamber was the hub of a network of smaller rooms, living quarters, storage areas, and what appeared to be a research station. "What is this place?" he asked, returning to the main chamber. "It's not just an observation post." Aurelia had remained by her throne, as still as one of the crystal formations. "It is a heritage site, a place of historical significance." Will raised an eyebrow. "A heritage site with defense systems and a research lab?" Her silver eyes fixed on him. "Our history and our future are intertwined. Commander, the crystals you see are more than decorative. They contain the encoded memories of my ancestors, stretching back millennia. Will moved closer to one of the larger formations, studying its internal structure. Data storage? That's impressive. They are not mere data, Aurelia said, a hint of passion creeping into her voice. They are lived experiences, complete neural patterns, our way of achieving a form of immortality. Will was genuinely fascinated now. You can access these memories? Experience them? Those of proper lineage can... Yes. Her gaze grew distant. I have walked in the footsteps of the first queen. I have seen the birth of stars through the eyes of ancestors who lived before your species discovered fire. The implications were staggering. Will studied Aurelia with new eyes, seeing beyond the imperial hauteur to the weight of history she carried. No wonder you're so concerned with genetic purity, he murmured. You're not just preserving biology. You're preserving a continuous line of consciousness. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, that he had understood so quickly. But she masked it immediately, returning to her regal detachment. Your suit, she said abruptly. It maintains your vital signs? Will nodded. Basic medical functions. Yes, temperature regulation, heart rate monitoring, that sort of thing. It can analyze external biology as well. To some extent, why? Aurelia approached, moving with that strange fluid grace that belied her size. I would know more of human physiology. Your kind remains enigmatic to us, despite our encounters. Will suppressed a smile. Scientific curiosity, it seemed, transcended species barriers. Sure, hold out your hand. She did so, her slender fingers nearly twice the length of his own. Will activated his suit's scanner and passed it over her outstretched palm. Data scrolled across his wrist display. Interesting, he murmured. Your cellular structure is similar to ours in basic organization, but your core temperature runs about 15 degrees Celsius hotter. And these energy readings... He looked up at her. You're bioluminescent at a cellular level. An adaptation to our homeworld's dim sunlight, Aurelia explained. It allows us to communicate across distances without technology. Like fireflies on Earth, Will said, smiling. When she looked confused, he added, small insects that glow to attract mates. You compare me to an insect? Her voice was dangerous. I compare a beautiful adaptation to another beautiful adaptation, Will replied smoothly. No offense intended, Your Majesty. Was that the faintest hint of a flush darkening her copper cheeks? Will couldn't be sure in the dim light, but her posture relaxed slightly. Your thermal regulation is inefficient, she noted, gesturing to his suit. You require artificial means to survive even mild temperature variations. True, Will admitted, but it makes us adaptable. We can engineer solutions rather than waiting for evolution to catch up. A short-term advantage at best, Aurelia replied. But there was less venom in her tone. She was engaged now, the scientist overcoming the queen. A sharp tremor interrupted their discussion, more violent than before. The floor beneath them shifted, and Will stumbled. Aurelia caught his arm, steadying him with surprising strength. The mountain is becoming unstable, she said, releasing him quickly. The storm must be worse than I thought. Will checked his suit's external sensors. Barometric pressure is dropping rapidly. This isn't just a weather event, it's a superstorm, probably triggered by seasonal changes in the polar ice caps. Aurelia moved to the control panel again, her expression grim. The power reserves are depleting faster than anticipated. The structural integrity field cannot compensate for these tremors. Will joined her, studying the energy distribution. We need to move to a more stable section of the complex. Is there a lower level? Something deeper in the mountain? Aurelia hesitated, clearly reluctant to reveal more of the facility. Another violent shake decided for her. Yes, there is a sanctuary chamber below. It houses the most ancient crystals. Lead the way, Will said, gathering his beacon and pack. Aurelia touched a sequence of symbols on the wall, and a section of the floor retracted, revealing a spiraling ramp downward. She gestured for Will to follow, and began to descend. The passage took them deep into the mountain's heart. The walls here were solid rock rather than the modified structure above, offering better protection from the storm's effects. The air grew warmer as they descended, humid with a mineral scent. The sanctuary chamber was smaller than the throne room, but somehow more impressive. The crystals here were massive, some as tall as Aurelia herself. They pulsed with an inner light that shifted and flowed like liquid fire. "The first memory," Aurelia said softly, approaching the largest formation. "The genetic template from which all Solarian royalty descends." Will stayed back, sensing the sacred nature of the space. "It's beautiful," he said simply. Aurelia placed her palm against the crystal surface. It flared brighter at her touch, the colors within swirling more rapidly. "My ancestors would be appalled to know a human stands in this chamber," she said, but her voice held more resignation than anger. "If it helps, I'm on my best behavior," Will replied with a small smile. To his surprise, Aurelia made a sound that might have been a laugh, a musical trill that echoed off the chamber walls. "Your species' persistent humor in the face of danger is perplexing." "It's how we cope," Will shrugged. "Laugh or cry, right? Might as well laugh." Aurelia turned from the crystal, studying him with those silver eyes. "You are not what I expected, Commander Watson." "Call me Will," he said. "If we're going to be trapped together for 2 days, we might as well drop the formalities." "Will," she repeated, the name sounding exotic in her musical voice. A simple name for a complex creature. "I could say the same about you, Aurelia." He deliberately omitted her titles, testing the boundaries. She did not correct him. Instead, she moved to a recessed area where several padded surfaces, beds, presumably, were arranged. "We should rest, conserve energy." Will nodded, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. The crash, the trek through the storm, the constant tension, it had all taken its toll. He selected a bed at a respectful distance from where Aurelia had settled and removed the bulkier components of his suit, leaving only the thin underlay. "If your people arrive first," he said, stretching out on the surprisingly comfortable surface, "what will happen to me?" Aurelia was silent for a long moment. "Standard protocol would dictate your transfer to a detention facility, followed by diplomatic negotiations for your release." "And what would Queen Aurelia dictate?" Will asked quietly. She met his gaze across the dimly lit chamber. "I have not decided yet." Will smiled. "Well, that's progress at least." Another tremor shook the chamber, milder this time, but longer in duration. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The crystals vibrated, creating a harmonic tone that resonated through the space. "Will your people come for you?" Aurelia asked when the shaking subsided. "If they can," Will replied honestly. "Colonel Sarah Hayes runs New Darwin with military precision. If my beacon signal reaches them, she'll send a team." "And if they encounter Solarian forces?" Will sighed. "That depends on who's in command of your ships. Some of your commanders have been less than diplomatic in similar situations." Aurelia's expression darkened. "High Commander Pyrax leads the fleet in this sector. He is traditional in his views." "Traditional meaning he'd shoot first and send condolences later?" Will asked dryly. "He believes in Solarian superiority with religious fervor," Aurelia confirmed. "He would see any human presence as provocation." Great, Will thought. Just what they needed. A zealot with a battleship. Then we'd better hope our people don't arrive at the same time. Aurelia rose suddenly, moving to the crystal formations. "There may be a way to send a more targeted message, to reach my ship directly, rather than allowing Pyrax to intercept it." Will sat up, instantly alert. "How?" She placed her hand on one of the smaller crystals. These formations are not merely storage devices. They can amplify and focus certain energy frequencies. If I could interface your beacon with this crystal, it might punch through the storm interference. Will finished, already reaching for his pack. Worth a try. They worked together, Will explaining the beacon's technology, while Aurelia demonstrated how the crystal could be attuned to specific energy patterns. It was delicate work, requiring both her innate connection to the crystal and his technical expertise. Hours passed, the work providing a welcome distraction from their precarious situation. Will found himself impressed by Aurelia's quick understanding of his explanations, while she seemed grudgingly respectful of his adaptability to her alien technology. "There," Will said finally, as the beacon's signal light began pulsing in synchronization with the crystal's inner glow. "That should amplify the signal by an order of magnitude at least." Aurelia stepped back, satisfaction evident in her posture. "Now we wait." "Now we wait," Will agreed, stifling a yawn. The chamber's warmth and his own exhaustion were catching up to him. "Mind if I get some actual sleep?" Aurelia gestured permission, and Will returned to his bed. Despite the danger of their situation, despite being trapped with an alien queen who had only recently stopped threatening him with a plasma spear, he felt oddly at peace. Maybe it was the gentle pulse of the crystals, maybe simple exhaustion, but sleep claimed him almost instantly. He woke to find Aurelia standing over him, her face tight with concern. "Will, wake up." Will blinked, disoriented. "What's wrong? How long was I out?" "Several hours. The tremors have worsened. The upper chamber has collapsed entirely." She gestured to the ramp they had descended. "The passage is blocked." Will sat up, instantly alert. "Are we trapped?" "There are other ways out, but they require traversing natural cave systems. It would be dangerous, even without the storm's effects." She paused. "And there is another problem. The life support systems above have failed completely. The air recyclers here are minimal, designed for ceremonial visits, not extended stays." Will checked his suit's atmospheric sensors. "How long?" "Perhaps 12 hours of breathable air. With two of us." Aurelia's voice was calm, but Will could sense the tension beneath. He stood, mind racing through options. "The beacon, did it work? Any response?" "Nothing yet. The storm may still be interfering." She hesitated. "Will, there is something else." Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. Her sunset skin seemed paler, almost translucent in places. And was she shivering? The chamber was warm, almost uncomfortably so for Will. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern overriding protocol. "You don't look well." Aurelia straightened, pride briefly masking whatever was wrong. "I am experiencing some unexpected physiological reactions. It is nothing." Will activated his suit's medical scanner. "Let me check, please," he added when she began to object. Reluctantly, she extended her arm. Will passed the scanner over her, frowning at the readings. "Your core temperature is fluctuating wildly, and these energy patterns—" He looked up at her, confused. "It's almost like your cellular structure is reorganizing itself." Aurelia turned away. "It is impossible." "What's impossible?" "Aurelia, if you know what's happening, you need to tell me. We're in this together now." She whirled back, her silver eyes flashing. "That is precisely the problem. Human. We are not meant to be together, in any sense of the word. Our species are incompatible by design." Will raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I never suggested otherwise. But right now, we need to—" "Your bioelectric field," she interrupted. "It has interfered with my cellular stability. The prolonged proximity has triggered an autonomic response in my reproductive system." Will stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "Wait, are you telling me that just being near me has made you sick?" Not sick, Aurelia said, frustration evident in her voice. The opposite. In fact, my body believes yours is compatible. It is attempting to synchronize with your genetic pattern. The implications hit Will like a physical blow. That's not possible. Cross-species reproduction should be impossible. Yes, Aurelia agreed grimly. And yet, she gestured to his scanner. Will looked down at the readings again, this time focusing on the patterns he'd initially overlooked. Hormonal surges, cellular division rates far above normal, energy signatures consistent with... "You're pregnant," he breathed, shock rendering him momentarily speechless. "But we haven't even... we've barely touched." Solarian reproduction does not require physical coupling, as humans understand it, Aurelia explained. Her scientific detachment, clearly a shield against her own shock. Genetic material can be exchanged through prolonged bioelectric field interaction. It is why we maintain strict isolation protocols with other species. And the crystals, Will realized. They amplified the effect when we were working together. Aurelia nodded grimly. A perfect storm of biological and technological factors. My body has accepted your genetic pattern and begun the integration process. Will ran a hand through his hair, trying to come to terms with the revelation. Can it be reversed? Something flashed in Aurelia's eyes. Anger? Hurt? Is that what you wish? I don't know what to wish, Will admitted honestly. This is a lot to process. A few hours ago you were threatening me with a spear, and now you're carrying my child? Our child? I don't even know what to call it. The Solarian term would be abomination, Aurelia said bitterly. A violation of 10,000 years of genetic purity. Will looked at her sharply. Is that what you believe? She turned away, moving to the largest crystal. What I believe is irrelevant. What matters is what will happen when my people discover this development. What will happen? Will asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. At best, medical termination of the pregnancy and genetic cleansing of my bloodline, Aurelia said flatly. At worst, execution for treason against the purity laws. Will felt cold despite the chamber's warmth. That's barbaric. It is tradition, Aurelia corrected, but without conviction. Her hand rested protectively over her abdomen, a gesture so human it made Will's heart ache. Then we need to make sure your people don't find out, he said firmly. My beacon. If we can contact New Darwin, get you there before the Solarian fleet arrives. You would protect me? Aurelia asked, genuine surprise in her voice. Even knowing what this pregnancy means, the political crisis it would trigger. Will moved closer to her, careful not to crowd her, but wanting her to see his sincerity. Aurelia, I don't know what this means yet, but I know that child, our child, deserves a chance to exist. And you deserve better than to be punished for something neither of us intended. Tears, iridescent, like liquid silver, formed in Aurelia's eyes. You humans and your ridiculous optimism, she said, but there was no malice in her words. Will smiled. It's another one of our survival traits. A chime from the beacon interrupted the moment. Will hurried to check it, hope surging. It's a response. New Darwin received our signal. They're sending a rescue team. Aurelia joined him, studying the message. The storm is abating. They estimate arrival in 6 hours. Will your people be monitoring for transmissions? Almost certainly, Aurelia confirmed. Pyrax will have detected the beacon's amplified signal. His ships will be coming as well. Will calculated quickly. If the storm is clearing, we might be able to reach the surface ourselves. Meet the rescue team halfway. Avoid a confrontation in orbit. The passage is blocked, Aurelia reminded him. You said there were natural caves. Other ways out, Will countered. Can you navigate them? Aurelia hesitated. Possibly. The crystal memories contain maps of the mountain's interior. But Will, she broke off, her face contorting in sudden pain. She gasped, doubling over. Will caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight as best he could. "What's wrong? What's happening?" "The pregnancy," Aurelia managed through clenched teeth. "Solarian gestation is normally a year-long process. But something is accelerating it." Will helped her to one of the beds. "My scanner. Let me see." The readings confirmed her assessment. The hybrid fetus was developing at an extraordinary rate, drawing energy directly from Aurelia's bioelectric field. Already it had reached a stage equivalent to months of normal development. "This isn't sustainable," Will said, fear tightening his chest. "It's draining you." Aurelia's breathing steadied as the pain subsided. "The crystal," she said, pointing to the large formation she had touched earlier. "Help me reach it." Will supported her as she staggered to the crystal. When her palm pressed against its surface, the interior light pulsed rapidly, then stabilized into a steady glow that seemed to flow up Aurelia's arm and spread throughout her body. "The first memory contains the collective life force of my ancestors," she explained, her voice stronger. "It can sustain me, at least temporarily. But it can't stop the accelerated development," Will guessed. "No. Whatever hybrid we have created, it follows its own rules." Aurelia met his gaze. "We need to reach your people. Will, Solarian medicine would seek to destroy this child. Perhaps human science will be more adaptable." Will nodded, determination setting his jaw. "Then let's get moving. Can you access those maps you mentioned?" Aurelia placed both palms on the crystal, her eyes closing in concentration. The light within the formation shifted, patterns emerging and dissolving. When she opened her eyes again, they gleamed with new knowledge. "There is a passage leading south," she said. "It connects to a larger cavern system that eventually reaches the surface about 3 kilometers from here. If your team approaches from the south—" "They will," Will assured her. "The new Darwin colony is in the southern hemisphere. They'll approach from that direction to avoid detection as long as possible. Then we should be able to intercept them before Pyrax's forces arrive." Aurelia straightened, visibly gathering her strength. "We must take some of the smaller crystals. They will help sustain me during the journey." Will helped her select several palm-sized formations, which she placed in a pouch at her waist. He gathered his own equipment, making sure the beacon was securely fastened to his pack. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm for support. Aurelia nodded, but hesitated before taking his arm. "Will, if we are separated, if something happens to me, you must promise to protect the child." The gravity of her request was not lost on him. This was a queen asking a foreign soldier to safeguard not just any child, but a hybrid that could rewrite the relationship between their species. "I promise," he said simply. "But nothing's going to happen to you. We're getting out of this together." Aurelia's hand clasped his forearm, her long fingers nearly encircling it completely. "Together, then—" They made their way to a small opening at the chamber's far end, partially concealed behind a crystal formation. Aurelia had to duck to enter, and the passage beyond was narrow, forcing them to proceed single file. Will took the lead, his suit's lights illuminating the way. The tunnels wound through the mountain's interior, sometimes so tight they had to squeeze through sideways. Other times, opening into caverns vast enough that Will's lights couldn't reach the ceiling. The air grew cooler as they ascended, but remained breathable. Aurelia's strength seemed to come and go in waves. Sometimes, she moved with her natural grace. Other times, she leaned heavily on Will. Her breathing labored. When they stopped to rest in a small chamber with a pool of clear water, Will checked his scanner again. "The fetus has reached a development stage equivalent to about 3 months of human pregnancy," he reported. "Its energy signature is unlike anything I've seen before." "I can feel it," Aurelia said softly. one hand resting on her abdomen. "It is not simply Solarian, nor human. It is something new." Will gave her a water purification tablet from his pack, and she dropped it into the pool. After it dissolved, she drank deeply, then splashed some of the cool water on her face. "We've been moving for nearly 2 hours," Will said, checking his chronometer. "If we maintain this pace, we should reach the surface with time to spare before the rescue team arrives." Aurelia nodded, but her silver eyes were troubled. "And if Pyrax's forces are already waiting?" "Then we hide and wait for my people," Will said firmly. "I won't let him take you." A small smile touched Aurelia's lips. Such confidence, from a species barely out of its planetary cradle. "Confidence is another one of our survival traits," Will replied with a grin. They continued their journey, the passages gradually sloping upward. The temperature continued to drop, and Will reactivated his suit's thermal regulation. Aurelia seemed less affected by the cold, her higher core temperature providing natural protection. When they paused again for rest, Will tried contacting New Darwin directly using his suit's communication system. The signal was weak, but he managed to establish a brief connection. "Hayes, do you copy? This is Watson." Static. Then a woman's voice broke through.
"Will, is that you? Signal's weak."
"Sarah, listen carefully. I'm with a Solarian, Queen Aurelia. We're heading for the surface. Coordinates to follow. She needs asylum. I repeat, she needs political asylum." "You're with the Solarian Queen?" Hayes's disbelief was evident even through the static. "Will, what the hell?" "No time to explain. Solarian forces will be converging on this location soon. High Commander Pyrax, he's hostile. We need extraction before he arrives." "Copy that. Sending coordinates of our approach vector. We'll meet you at—" The transmission cut out, but not before Will's suit had received the coordinate data. "They're coming," he told Aurelia. "Landing zone is about 1 kilometer from where this tunnel system should exit." Relief flashed across Aurelia's features, quickly replaced by another spasm of pain. She gripped Will's arm, her fingers digging into his suit with surprising strength. "Aurelia?" Will steadied her, concern mounting as he saw the strain on her face. "The child," she gasped. "It grows stronger by the hour. Its energy signature is interfacing with mine." Will helped her sit, bracing her against the tunnel wall. His scanner showed the fetus now at a development stage equivalent to 5 months, its own distinct bioelectric field pulsing in time with Aurelia's heart. "This is impossible," he murmured. "No pregnancy progresses this rapidly." "No natural pregnancy," Aurelia corrected, her breathing steadying as the pain subsided. "But this is something new, a true hybrid, taking energy directly from both our genetic patterns." Will frowned.
"Both? But I'm not—"
"Your bioelectric field remains linked to mine," Aurelia explained. The crystal amplified the connection. Distance would normally weaken it, but the child itself is now acting as a conduit, drawing energy from you through me. Will digested this information, a strange mix of awe and fear washing over him. Is it hurting you?" Aurelia's expression softened. "It is taxing, but not painful, not always. And there is something else." She took his hand and placed it on her abdomen. "Feel?" At first, Will felt nothing through his suit's glove. Then, gradually, he became aware of a tingling sensation, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate with his own heartbeat. It was as if something was reaching out to him, acknowledging his presence. "It knows you," Aurelia said softly. "It recognizes your energy pattern." Will stared at his hand on her abdomen, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what was happening. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident or a scientific anomaly. This was his child, his and Aurelia's, a being that should not exist, and yet did. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Can you stand?" Aurelia nodded, accepting his help. They resumed their journey, moving more slowly now but with renewed determination. The tunnels began to show signs of the storm's effects, cracks in the walls, fallen debris that they had to navigate around. After another hour of difficult progress, Will's suit detected a change in the air currents. "We're getting close to the surface," he said. "Air pressure is dropping, temperature too." Aurelia paused, head tilted as if listening. "There are sounds above, mechanical." Will strained his ears but heard nothing. "Your hearing must be better than mine." "Ships," Aurelia said with certainty. "Multiple engines. Heavy class." Will's heart sank. "Pyrax?" "Most likely. His flagship, the Imperial Dawn, carries a complement of smaller vessels for planetary landings." They pushed forward more urgently now, the tunnel widening as it angled sharply upward. Light appeared ahead, natural light, pale and cold. The exit. Will approached cautiously, staying low. The opening was partially concealed by an outcropping of rock, giving them some cover to survey the situation. The storm had indeed passed, leaving a landscape transformed by fresh ice. The sky above was clear, a pale lavender hue streaked with high clouds. And dominating that sky were three massive ships, their hulls gleaming silver in the weak sunlight. Smaller craft circled beneath them, obviously searching patterns. "Pyrax," Aurelia confirmed grimly. "He brings the full might of his battle group." Will checked the coordinates Hayes had sent. "Our pickup point is beyond that ridge to the south. If we stay low, use the terrain for cover." Aurelia nodded, but her face was tight with pain again. "Will, I don't know if I can move quickly enough. The child, its development is accelerating even faster now that we're closer to the surface." Will made a quick decision. "I'll contact Hayes. Have them move the landing zone closer." He activated his suit's communication system again. "Hayes, do you copy? We need a new pickup point. Current LZ is hot." This time, the response was immediate and clear. "Copy that, Will. We see the Solarian ships. Already adjusted course to approach from the east. There's a canyon 200 meters from your position that should provide cover. Sending coordinates now." Will's display updated with the new information. "Got it. We're on our way. Be advised. Queen Aurelia needs immediate medical attention when we arrive." "Understood. Medical team standing by. ETA 12 minutes. Will turned to Aurelia. "New plan. We head east, not south. There's a canyon that will hide us from orbital scans. My people will meet us there in 12 minutes. Aurelia pushed herself to her feet, determination evident in every line of her body. "Then let us not waste time." They emerged from the tunnel, immediately pressing close to the rock face for cover. The air was bitingly cold, the wind still strong enough to make movement difficult. Will supported Aurelia as they began making their way along the mountainside, keeping to shadows and using ice formations for concealment. Above them, the Solarian ships continued their search pattern, seemingly unaware of their presence. But they were thorough, methodical. It would only be a matter of time before they detected the human rescue ship approaching. The canyon Hayes had mentioned came into view, a deep fissure in the planet's surface, narrow enough that the larger ships couldn't descend into it, but wide enough for a shuttle, perfect for their needs. They were halfway there when Aurelia stumbled, crying out in pain. Will caught her, but she was nearly dead weight in his arms, her body contorting.
"Aurelia, what's happening?"
Her silver eyes were wide with shock and something like wonder.
"The child, it comes!"
Will stared at her in disbelief.
"Now? That's impossible, even with the accelerated development."
"Nothing about this is following normal rules," Aurelia gasped. "I can feel it. The energy signature is stabilizing, preparing for separation." Will's mind raced. They couldn't stay exposed like this. The search parties would spot them within minutes, but Aurelia clearly couldn't move any further. "Hold on," he said, gathering her into his arms. It was like trying to lift a tree. her 8-foot frame far heavier than it looked, but adrenaline and desperation lent him strength. Staggering under her weight, he began moving toward the canyon as quickly as he could manage. Aurelia tried to protest, but another contraction, or whatever the Solarian equivalent was, silenced her. Her skin began to glow, the sunset hue brightening to a fierce amber that Will could see even through his visor. "Almost there," he encouraged, though his muscles screamed in protest. "Just hold on a little longer." They reached the canyon's edge, just as a search beam swept over the area they had just left. Will carefully picked his way down the steep slope, finding a hollow in the canyon wall, deep enough to provide shelter. He gently laid Aurelia down. "Hayes," he gasped into his communicator. "Need immediate evac. Medical emergency. 3 minutes out. Will, approaching from the north end of the canyon." Will turned his attention back to Aurelia. Her entire body was now suffused with light, pulsing in waves that corresponded to her contractions. The small crystals she had brought from the sanctuary lay scattered around her, each one glowing in response to her condition. "Will," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "The child comes. You must be ready." "Ready for what? Aurelia. I don't know how to deliver a Solarian baby, let alone a hybrid." "Not deliver," she corrected, her voice strained. "Receive. The birth. It is not physical as humans understand it. The child will emerge as pure energy first, then coalesce." As if in response to her words, the light emanating from her intensified, concentrating around her abdomen. Will's suit sensors went haywire, unable to process the readings. The air between them seemed to shimmer, distorting like a heat mirage. And then it appeared, a sphere of pure energy, hovering above Aurelia's body. It pulsed with a light that seemed to contain every color imaginable, yet none that Will could name. Slowly, it began to take shape, features forming from the radiance. It was tiny, no larger than Will's hand, but perfectly formed. Neither human nor Solarian, but something beautiful and new. Its skin had the sunset glow of its mother, but its eyes, when they opened, were startlingly blue. Will's eyes, the child, for it was undeniably a child now, solid and real, floated gently down to rest on Aurelia's chest. A sound escaped her, halfway between a laugh and a sob, as she cradled the infant. "A daughter," she whispered, looking up at Will with tears streaming down her face. "We have a daughter." Will knelt beside them, too overwhelmed for words. He reached out a tentative finger, and the child grasped it with a tiny hand. A jolt of energy passed between them, not painful, but intense. Recognition, connection. The moment of wonder was shattered by the roar of engines above. Will looked up to see a Solarian shuttle hovering at the canyon's edge, searchlights sweeping downward. "They've found us," Aurelia said, her voice suddenly sharp with fear. She clutched the child closer. "Will—" "I won't let them take either of you," he promised, positioning himself between her and the shuttle. But what could he do against a military vessel with only his sidearm? The answer came in the form of another engine roar, this one from the north. A human shuttle burst into view, weapons deployed and shields active. It placed itself between the Solarian craft and Will's position. Hayes's voice crackled over his communicator. "Found some friends. Will, get ready for pickup." The human shuttle descended rapidly, landing with precision on the narrow canyon floor. The rear hatch opened, revealing Hayes herself, her compact figure instantly recognizable, even in full combat gear. "Move! Move! Move!" she shouted, providing covering fire as two medics rushed forward with a stretcher. Will helped them transfer Aurelia, who refused to relinquish her hold on the child. They boarded quickly, the shuttle lifting off the moment the hatch sealed behind them. "Cutting it close, Commander," Hayes said, her weathered face breaking into a relieved smile. Then her eyes fell on Aurelia and the infant.
Holy shit, is that?
A long story, Will said. One we need to save for when we're safely away from Pyrax's ships. Hayes nodded. Professional focus returning. We've got a head start, but they outgun us significantly. Our best bet is to make orbit and rendezvous with the Darwin Actual before they can intercept. The shuttle accelerated, pressing them back into their seats. Through the viewports, Will could see the larger Solarian vessels adjusting course to pursue.
Will they fire on us?
Hayes asked, eyeing Aurelia. The Queen looked up from her child, her expression grave. Pyrax believes in genetic purity, above all else. If he suspects what has happened, what this child represents, he may well consider it worth breaking treaty to destroy us. Hayes swore under her breath.
Wonderful. Hang on, everyone. This is going to get rough.
The shuttle banked sharply, diving to skim just above the planet's surface, where the larger ships couldn't follow easily. Smaller Solarian craft peeled off in pursuit, weapons charging. We need to talk to Pyrax, Will said suddenly. Aurelia, is there a way to open a direct channel? The child, Aurelia said, looking down at the infant who was watching the commotion with alert blue eyes. She carries my genetic markers. She can access Solarian communication frequencies. Will wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. She's less than 10 minutes old. How could she possibly? But Aurelia was already guiding the child's tiny hand to the shuttle's communication panel. The moment they made contact, the system lit up with new frequencies, bypassing normal protocols. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the stern face of a Solarian male. His skin was darker than Aurelia's, nearly bronze, with intricate patterns etched across his brow. Queen Aurelia, he said, his voice cold with formality. You dishonor your lineage by fleeing with these humans.
High Commander Pyrax, Aurelia replied, her regal bearing returning despite her exhaustion.
I seek not to flee but to protect something precious. Something you would destroy out of fear and ignorance. Pyrax's eyes narrowed. The humans have poisoned your mind with their chaos. Return to the Imperial Dawn immediately for purification and cleansing.
I will not,
Aurelia said firmly. She shifted, allowing Pyrax to see the child in her arms. Behold, High Commander, the future of both our peoples. Pyrax recoiled visibly, his face contorting with horror.
Abomination! You have violated the sacred laws of genetic purity. This is treason against the very essence of Solarian identity.
This is evolution, Aurelia countered. The next step for a species that has stagnated in its isolation. Our birth rates fall with each generation. Pyrax. Our genetic diversity withers. We face extinction through our own pride. Better extinction than contamination, Pyrax spat. I will not allow that thing to exist. All vessels, target the human shuttle. Destroy it at all costs. The transmission cut off abruptly. Hayes immediately began evasive maneuvers as weapons fire streaked past them.
So much for diplomacy, she muttered.
We're still 2 minutes from rendezvous with Darwin Actual. Will turned to Aurelia. You said the child interfaces with energy patterns. Could she? Perhaps, Aurelia said, understanding immediately. But it would be dangerous. She is newly born, her powers untested. What other choice do we have? Will asked gently. Aurelia looked down at their daughter, who was watching her mother's face with an intelligence that seemed impossible in one so young. A silent communication seemed to pass between them. Hold her, Aurelia said, passing the tiny infant to Will. The moment his hands touched his daughter's skin, Will felt that same energy connection, stronger now. It was as if part of his consciousness expanded, touching something vast and unfamiliar. The child made a soft cooing sound, then raised a tiny hand toward the viewport. Energy, the same multicolored radiance that had marked her birth, began to flow from her fingertips, spreading outward in a rapidly expanding sphere. Will watched in awe as the energy wave passed through the shuttle's hull without resistance. continuing outward to engulf the pursuing Solarian craft. One by one, their weapons went silent, engines sputtering.
What the hell?
Hayes breathed, staring at the displays. They're dropping like flies, power signatures failing across the board. The child lowered her hand, looking up at Will with those impossibly blue eyes. A smile, his own smile, curved her tiny lips.
She's created a localized energy disruption field,
Aurelia explained, her voice filled with wonder.
Solarian technology relies on crystals similar to those in the sanctuary. She's rewritten their energy patterns somehow.
Hayes seized the opportunity, pushing the shuttle to maximum acceleration. Within moments, they had broken atmosphere, the sleek form of the Darwin Actual appearing ahead. Darwin Actual, this is Hayes. Prepare for immediate boarding and jump to FTL. We have multiple disabled Solarian vessels, but no guarantee they'll stay that way. As they approached the larger human ship, Will looked down at his daughter, still nestled in his arms.
She needs a name, he said softly.
Aurelia reached out, her long fingers brushing the child's cheek. In Solarian tradition, royalty is named for cosmic phenomena, given the circumstances of her birth. Aurora, Will suggested. It means dawn in an ancient human language.
Aurora Dawn,
Aurelia repeated, testing the sound.
Princess Aurora Dawn of the 8th Dynasty.
A smile touched her lips, though I suspect she will forge her own title in time. The shuttle docked with the Darwin Actual, and medical teams rushed to meet them. Will reluctantly handed Aurora to a specialist in biotechnology, but stayed close as they were escorted to the medical bay. Hayes pulled Will aside as the doctors began examining Aurelia and the child. Will, what the hell have you done? That's the Queen of the Solarian Empire and what appears to be your hybrid child. The diplomatic implications alone could change everything. Will finished for her. Think about it. Sarah, a child of both species, living proof that we're not as incompatible as everyone thought. This could end centuries of tension. Or start a war, Hayes countered. Pyrax didn't seem thrilled about this development. Pyrax is just one faction, Will argued. Once the broader Solarian Council sees Aurora, understands what she represents. Aurora? Hayes interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Will felt heat rise to his face.
Her name, Aurora Dawn.
Hayes studied him for a long moment. You really care for them, don't you? The Queen and the child. It wasn't just a diplomatic decision to bring them here. It started that way, Will admitted. But now... He looked over at Aurelia, who was speaking with the medical team, her natural authority evident despite her exhaustion. Now it's more, much more. Hayes sighed. Well, I hope you're prepared for the consequences. This isn't going to be simple. Will, not by a long shot. The ship shuddered slightly as it jumped to FTL, leaving Kalis 6 and Pyrax's disabled fleet behind. But Will knew Hayes was right. This was just the beginning. 3 months later, Will stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Dawn, the same flagship that had once pursued them across Kalis 6. Now it was the site of a historic ceremony. Its vast central chamber transformed into a space of diplomatic significance. Delegations from Earth and the Solarian colonies filled the chamber, a sea of faces representing both species. At the center stood a raised platform where Aurelia, resplendent in formal regalia, addressed the gathered dignitaries. For 10,000 years, the Solarian Empire has prided itself on genetic purity, she said, her musical voice carrying effortlessly through the space. We believed isolation was strength, that to remain unchanged was to remain perfect. She paused, silver eyes scanning the crowd. We were wrong. True strength lies in adaptation, in embracing change, rather than fearing it. Our fear has brought us to the brink of extinction, our birth rates falling, our genetic diversity collapsing under its own weight. Will watched from the side of the platform, where he stood in formal Earth Expeditionary Force dress uniform. Beside him, cradled in his arms, was Aurora. She had grown rapidly in the 3 months since her birth, already the size of a human 1-year-old. Her sunset orange skin had developed subtle patterns, reminiscent of her mother's royal markings, but uniquely her own. Her blue eyes, Will's eyes, took in everything with that same impossible intelligence. Today, Aurelia continued, we embrace a new future, not the elimination of what makes us Solarian, but the enhancement of it through cooperation, through shared strength, through, yes, love. She turned, gesturing for Will and Aurora to join her. As they stepped forward, a murmur ran through the crowd. Many had heard of the hybrid child, but few had seen her in person. Aurora, seemingly aware of her role in the moment, straightened in Will's arms. Then, to the astonishment of the gathered delegates, she began to glow with that now familiar energy, a gentle radiance that illuminated the platform. Princess Aurora Dawn, Aurelia announced, first of the 8th dynasty, child of Earth and Kalis, living embodiment of our shared future. From the Solarian delegation, a figure stepped forward, High Commander Pyrax. His face was stern as ever, but the hatred that had burned in his eyes during their confrontation was gone, replaced by something more complex. He approached the platform and, to Will's surprise, knelt before Aurora. The abomination has become the miracle, he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. I was wrong. We were all wrong. The child's power cannot be denied, nor can her significance. Aurora regarded him solemnly, then reached out one small hand. When Pyrax hesitantly took it, the same energy that had disabled his fleet flowed between them, but gently this time, a connection rather than a disruption. Pyrax's eyes widened. She speaks, he whispered, not in words but in understanding. She interfaces directly with neural patterns, Will explained. A hybrid ability, drawing from both our species' unique traits. Pyrax rose, turning to address both delegations. I, who once would have destroyed this child, now pledge my fleet to her protection. The genetic purists faction is dissolved. We serve the 8th dynasty and its new path. The ceremony continued. Formal treaties signed. Alliances formalized. But Will found his attention continually drawn back to Aurelia and Aurora, his family, as impossible as that still seemed. Later, when the diplomats had retired to their quarters and the formal proceedings had ended for the day, Will found Aurelia in her private chamber. Aurora was asleep in a specially designed crib, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, a soft glow pulsing beneath her skin in time with her heartbeat. She grows stronger each day, Aurelia said softly as Will approached. The scientists believe her abilities will continue to develop in ways we cannot predict. Are you worried? Will asked, coming to stand beside her. Aurelia considered the question. Not for her potential. No. Aurora will forge her own path, as all children must. I worry more about those who would use her for their own ends, on both sides. Will nodded. The political ramifications of Aurora's existence were still unfolding. Some saw her as a symbol of peace, others as a military asset, still others as a religious figure fulfilling ancient prophecies. We'll protect her, he said simply. Together. Aurelia turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. Together, she agreed. A concept I once would have found laughable. A Solarian queen and a human commander, raising a hybrid child who might reshape galactic politics. Will smiled. Life finds a way, as we humans like to say. Indeed it does. Aurelia's hand found his, her long fingers intertwining with his shorter ones. And sometimes, Life finds a better way than we could have imagined. Aurora stirred in her sleep, the energy field around her briefly intensifying. Both parents turned to watch as patterns formed in the light. Star systems, planets, possible futures unfolding and collapsing in miniature above the sleeping child.
What do you think she's dreaming of? Will whispered.
Aurelia's expression softened with a mother's love. Everything, nothing, the universe as it is and as it could be. She squeezed Will's hand gently. A future where differences become strengths, not divisions. Will thought of their journey, from adversaries in a frozen outpost to partners in a new galactic order. From Queen Aurelia laughing at the very idea of genetic compatibility with a human, to mother of their extraordinary child. "I'd say that future is already here," he said, gazing at their daughter's peaceful face. "Aurora Dawn indeed."